Welcome back to MotoringBox. I'm Sean McKellar and we are in the Ipswich CBD. It is going to be a stinking hot day here today, 39 degrees, which is 102 Fahrenheit for people still talking freedom units. A week ago, I decided to put my Magna Ralliart in for a roadworthy certificate just to see, give it a shot. Does it pass or does it fail? And if it does fail, what's actually wrong with it? I started washing the car just to get it looking really good. And then I noticed one of the doors actually doesn't unlock. So it had never done that before in my ownership. Perhaps it was the water from the car wash that affected it. I also figured out all 4 of these seat belts are sort of failing to retract. So that was another thing in particular that was making me quite nervous, because that is definitely something that they could fail you on a roadworthy for. My heart just sank. I knew that it wasn't going to pass. But then the guy turned up and he took one look at the car and he said, "My God, you never see these around anymore. Never sell this thing. The paint's crap, but he could see through it. He could see that it was a diamond in the rough." He had a look under the engine bay, he had a look through the interior, a bit of a peek underneath at the brakes. As he returned from the drive, I was sweating bullets. I knew I was up for failure, I just didn't know how bad it was going to be. So he came back, he had his iPad in his hand and he said, "Sean, give us your email because your certificate is going to be coming through in about 10 minutes. So here we are. My Mitsubishi Magna Ralliart is officially on the road. This episode of MotoringBox is proudly supported by Century Batteries. It's been going really good, but there are still a few little faults and jobs left to do. And also, I'm going to fully own up to this. I actually backed this thing into a bollard yesterday afternoon. I can't believe it. It is the first time in my life I've ever done such a thing. Luckily, I got out of it pretty lightly. All I've got here is a bit of missing paint here on the bumper, which is chipping off anyway. But the boot lid is untouched, and more importantly, the spoiler is too. So that bollard came out of nowhere. I believe it was probably lower than the boot height of the car, so I didn't see it. So hopefully that doesn't end up on Dashcam Owners Australia, because there were a lot of cars around. But yeah, let's get this thing out on the road and take it for its maiden journey. Now, it is my birthday in a couple of days' time, Feb 14th, and this is my birthday present, to be able to drive this car on the road legally. So let's get this thing started up. It sounds pretty good. Now, as I discovered in previous videos I've made with this car, the sound does not come through very well on the YouTube video through the mic. You have to take my word for it. It is loud, but it's good. Feels so good to be out on the road in this thing, I tell ya. After all the work we put in, it is a joy to drive. And it just feels like it has been completely transformed, because where you're sitting in the interior was like a dog's breakfast before. It was like sitting on someone's sweaty ball sack. Both the smell, the feel, and just how it looked. But now, so good. So what I've learned from driving this thing for the past week or so is that the exhaust definitely needs doing. Don't get me wrong, it sounds good, but when it's about $2,000 to about $2,500, it's got this frequency and this reverberation that just goes through the whole car, and it's not too bad around town, but on the highway, that's where you need to sit to do highway cruise, and it is just horrendous, so bad. So I'm not sure if that's just the rust holes in the exhaust that's causing that, or what the story is, but it definitely needs to be looked at. As you would have seen, I have a new rear muffler for that, but I might need to talk to my local exhaust guy and just work out, does it need a resonator? It probably does, because I think that's what you can use to get rid of exhaust drone, and that's what the problem is. So we'll get there. But yeah, apart from that, it's just tiny stuff. The car drives really well on the road. I do get a bit of wind noise from around these pillarless windows, but they can actually be adjusted, so I'm gonna need to get in there at some point and do that. It's just lots of little things. It is hot, so I'm gonna stick the aircon on. The aircon works beautifully. It smells awesome. It's like the best smelling aircon system out of all of the cars I own. It is well worth it. This is actually something like the whole dash out, clean everything job. That's something I want to do on the AU Falcon, because that thing just smells a little bit spicy when you turn it on and the air comes out for the first time. It smells pretty bad. So it would be cool to do that on that car. I think it's worth the effort. But also, you know what a brilliant side effect of all that job was actually how tight everything feels. So at the moment, this car is almost got no rattles at all. In fact, the only thing that is rattling sometimes is a little window switch panel here on the driver's door, and that's because some of the little retaining clips are a bit loose, so we'll be able to bend them back into shape. And once that's done, everything in here is just amazing. You know, it's not the smoothest car, like this suspension is quite stiff because it's the sportiest Mitsubishi Magna there is. But even with that stiffness, to have everything feel nice and tight, no rattles, for me, is a huge deal. And that is why I hate lowered cars. But for this one, fingers crossed it stays as tight as a drum as it is at the moment. So I've had a few passengers in this car as well, and they've been very impressed. They were colleagues of mine. Took them out for lunch during work hours, and they were pretty impressed as well. Hello guys, if you're watching. But it's pretty good for a $5.5 grand car, which admittedly at this point I have put about another $5 grand into it. So the running total, I'll put it on screen. I am keeping track of it. We're over 10 grand. So could I get 10 grand for this car tomorrow? Doubtful. Maybe, because it's kind of internet famous, but apart from that, I don't think you could. So fixing cars, yeah, I'm not sure if it's worth it. Not financially worth it anyway. It's something you do for fun, for the enjoyment, the satisfaction. Even with this thing looking as bad as it does paint-wise and panel-wise, I'm pretty proud of it. And do you know what else is really cool about this car is it is not very fast. Like, it's fast enough, but it is not fast. And the really cool thing about that is you can actually get maximum enjoyment out of a car like this on the street. You know, it feels good to drive, it sounds good, and it's not gonna like lose your license in 2 seconds flat. So you can sort of rev this thing out in first, rev it out a little bit in second, and you're only doing sort of 60 or 70 Ks an hour. The gearbox seems to be fairly like close ratio gears. I think you're doing about 2.5 grand at 100 or 110 on the highway. So you've got 5 gears to sort of get you to that speed, and yeah, you can really have a bit of fun with it. The sound does add to the theatre, and I reckon it sounds crap when you watch it on YouTube, but when you're sitting here and you rev it out, it just sounds great. So cars like this are brilliant fun, and I think that's kind of where cars like the Mazda MX-5 and things like the Toyota 86, that's kind of the magic they have as well. You don't have a lot of power, but you have a car that handles well, it's decently quick. I wouldn't say they sound good, but you know, it's kind of that simple thrill. You can mash the accelerator for up to 10 seconds at a time and you're probably still, you know, just approaching 100 Ks an hour. Whereas in an XR6 Turbo, you're probably like 160 or something. So cars like the XR6 Turbo give you blue balls, whereas this gives you an outlet for all your frustration, all the shit things that happen to you on a particular day. You can jump in this and it just turns it all around. I was going down the highway, I think it was a couple of days ago, and it just hit a certain spot in the rev range, and you know, that reverb came through the car and my ears were physically in pain. That's how loud and sort of how much it was resonating through the car. It was, I don't even want to put my son in this car at the moment. He's only 2 years old, he's got probably amazing hearing. I reckon it's almost at the point where it'd be doing you damage. The response on this engine too, I've said it before on the first drive, it's super responsive. You know, you chuck it back a gear and it's like razor sharp throttle response, and if you're not careful and you're in lower gears like third or second or first, it can actually be quite violent. So Mitsubishi Australia were really throwing as much as they could at the wall. You know, they came up with this Ralliart concept. They also came up with a Magna sports wagon concept, which I'll chuck it on screen, have a look at it. But I don't think they made it. There was a sports wagon, but it wasn't as hot as that. So it's kind of like, you can almost sense the frustration that must have existed in the headquarters of Mitsubishi Australia. They wanted to do all these awesome things, but you know, Mitsubishi Japan probably looked at the books and the figures, and once they had an indication of how many cars they reckon they could sell, they probably just kiboshed everything. So when you think about that, it's pretty lucky that this car even exists, that it was even released. So they even made 500 of them. And the crazy thing about those 500 cars is the price they actually charged for them. So back in the day, I think a regular TJ Magna, maybe a VRX, was around 38,000 bucks. At the time, a Commodore SS, which I think was the VY Commodore at the time, was about 48, 49,000. XR6 Turbo kicked off at about 46. This car here was about 49 grand. So it was a Mitsubishi Magna Ralliart, or it was an SS Commodore. How many people do you think chose a Magna Ralliart over an SS Commodore? Or even thought, no, I'm gonna spend a few more grand over an XR6 Turbo to get a car that's slower and has less street cred. You know, not many people would have gone for that, and that's probably why there were only 500 cars anyway. So let's head out onto the highway for a bit of a spin. Let's flatten it. Pretty cool. So yeah, everything on this car works. I can arm the cruise, I can set it. We're away. The drone does intensify when you're not the one controlling the throttle though. It can put you in some pretty horrendous bands of the RPM range, but it's good. Apart from a bit of wind noise, like I said here, from needing to adjust the glass on the windows, and that reverberation on the exhaust, it's comfy. The seats are nice and comfy, it smells great, the aircon is very powerful. I've got a really great head unit here with the Itoto A6. I've had to install a reversing camera as well. Ever since I backed into that bollard, I thought, you know what, because this car's got that massive wing in the back and the boot is also fairly tall and you sit fairly low down in the car, the camera's a no-brainer. So I've installed that. You won't be able to see here, but I've got a reversing camera which I picked up about 5 years ago. It was meant to be for my NC Fairlane. This mirror actually has a reversing camera screen built into it, which comes on when you engage reverse gear. It's a nice subtle thing. I could have hooked it up to my head unit, but when I'm reversing, you're sort of looking in the mirrors most of the time, and it's more convenient to have the screen up there than it is all the way down there. But yeah, it's great. So really happy as well with the Bridgestone RE003 Potenzas. I find them to be a fairly comfortable tyre. They're fairly quiet. They handle well. The suspension in this car also feels pretty good. There's not a lot of body roll. There's not a lot of bounce. So I know those Koni shocks are pretty old, but hey, they're still performing. So if it's not broke, don't fix it. So at this stage, I want to thank all of you guys for tuning in, for watching the videos, for all your awesome comments. 99.9% of you guys are incredibly supportive. I got a few haters, which does get me down sometimes. You got to remember, I'm human. I have feelings. I have days sometimes which are terrible days, and then you get home, you start scrolling and you see some of this shit that people write. Some of it can be not very harsh at all, but when you've had a terrible day, even the smallest kind of jabs that people take at you can sometimes get you down. So I try my best to not let them get to me, but I really appreciate everybody's support. My Patreons, my channel members, people who have bought Homegrown Heroes shirts for $59.95. Top quality shirts, I might add. It all helps, and it's fantastic. You know, this is a car that I would never have bought, and now I get to experience it. So if you've got any questions about the Magna Ralliart, if you want to drop a comment, do put it down in the section below. Throw me a like, subscribe if you want to. We have some more journeys ahead with this car. We're going to enjoy it. Now that she's registered, we can fix up anything else that needs to be fixed, get it painted, and yeah, see what happens. See if I end up loving it long term or not. So thank you very much guys again. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Shit. Bugger.